Okay. Hello, friends of Herbie, and welcome to the third episode of the Campfire Talks with Herbie. So, as you know, this is a new experience for myself here. I am really going outside of my comfort zone, doing these webcasts and being live streamed globally. And in addition to that, I am handling this little device, my tablet, with a mirror board that soon you will be able to see as I go through my presentation. But as it's becoming a custom, we have a guest even this evening. And I will just bring him on board right now. Good
Hello,
evening.
Steve. Hi
Hello, this
there.
is Minton. Minton Brooks from, well, you tell us. No, who are you? Tell us something about you.
Okay, well, I need to let you know that I live in the South Bronx in New York, USA. So there's a lot of noise out there. I closed the window, but hopefully we won't be disturbed with sirens, etc. But I am an independent consultant. In the context of Herbie, that's my identity, I guess. For the last 20 years, I've been worked my way through all the variants of Agile in the direction of ultimately TameFlow. And in a larger context, I'm a human being trying to make my contribution to a better life on Earth, dealing with minor subjects like a global pandemic, climate change, and ending racism, for example. So what I love to be able to do, my goal in life is to be able to combine parts of my Herbie identity and consulting identity with my larger identity. And I do hope, because we can potentially bring relief to overburdened teams and make our work lives a better place, more time for family. In that sense, maybe, there's a chance.
Okay, that's a nice introduction, and you have a good attitude and mindset and ambition. So, how did you get involved with this industry, with agile and performance, and then you came across
Yeah,
this thing, TameFlow? What happened?
yeah. Well, I came from a very somewhat unusual direction in that my first career, I was an art director and publishing designer and marketing. So as I could see that marketing content was going digital, it became very clear that it will be possible to custom present communications to even individuals. So I created a startup in 1994 to that end. I was clueless about programming, so I picked a method, and I picked Objectory and got to know Ivar Jakobsen. So my first, big impacting guru was Ivar, and we became friends. I
And
worked
he's
with him.
Swedish, right?
Yes, he is indeed. Yeah. So here
Yeah.
you go.
All right, there you go. Yeah.
Another sweet stuff. So I worked for 6 years then with the unified process and the rational unified process and the evolution of Dean Leffingwell brilliant marketing to a point at which I learned a lot, but my startup, which was called Direct Touch, I didn't get the brass ring, as we say. So, but I felt I knew enough about iterative and incremental development that I could put out a shingle for consulting and coaching in the summer of 2000. So that's what I've done ever since. In the last 10 years, as Agile at scale became the thing, I put a lot of time and effort into the Scaled Agile framework, learned a ton. And that was my second Dean Leffingwell engagement, if you will.
So you learned marketing at least.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So in like 2014, in a big safe engagement, I learned about Kanban and the Kanban method because the company where I was working had a very seriously good Kanban element to their SAFe implementation. So I learned a ton and I liked everything about Kanban. And, and then I worked in 3 different companies in the infrastructure and operations division doing Kanban. And that's the context in which maybe a year ago I started seriously reading TameFlow as I wanted more. I love the Kanban method, but I wanted more. I sensed that there were places where our corporate customers would like to be able to see faster moves, if you will. And so I've become, a real fan of TameFlow. I've done a lot of reading, and I just finished the training, the train the trainer training. So I'm
with
really
Daniel, right?
With Daniel, yeah.
How was that? Oh, that guy is a bit crazy, but
very good. Very good.
I know Daniel is listening here to us. So hello,
sure
Daniel.
Yeah, no, he's been fantastic to work with. He's given me so much attention, and I know he's going to, he's committed to helping me now as I try to, actually put the training into use and make sure that
you intend to make a living with TameFlow, right?
I'm getting there. I mean, I as independent, I wanted to mention actually that independent consultants are really kind of a backbone of the industry, but we don't have that much profile as independent consultants. So I think that we can bring a good sense of how to serve our customers well, bringing into play the kind of methods and practices and principles that we like and play them as is appropriate, serving the customer's interest. And for me, right now, there's a lot of very compelling, especially for executive level folks. There's a lot to be said for the kind of focus and leverage that you can get with TameFlow constraints thinking.
Okay, great. I see that we start getting some comments here, so let me just maybe greet a few people. We have, again, Doug Boying from Atlanta. Hi, Doug. We have, of course, Daniel. Daniel, why don't we have a picture of you? You should put up a fancy picture, just an avatar like that. We would like to see you. Okay, so we have Rudiger. Rudiger is becoming a regular. He hasn't missed a beat. Hi, Rudiger. Likewise, Nick. Nick is here, and then we have the mysterious software process and measurement cast, which is of course Tom Cagley. Tom Cagley commented the hyperbook question mark. Wonder what that referred to. Maybe Tom, you want to comment and tell us what you were thinking. And oh yes, Daniel said he was listening, so he caught me when I said he was crazy, but he knows that. I always tell him, so not a problem. Okay, so let's go on. What is a typical day in your life? Any?
Well, my little terrier wakes me up at 5:30 promptly because she wants her breakfast, and so I do the 7-minute scientific workout, which is a little cheap investment every day that does keep the muscles working, and a little breakfast. I am a whole foods plant-based guy, so I have berries in the morning, and then I have 2 big salads during the day, and I pay a lot of attention to my health, which food makes a big part. And then, I try to be working by 7:30. And of course, these days I don't need to commute anywhere at the moment. And then later in the day, after work, I'm involved in a lot of different communities. So both within the Herbie context of, multiple, Kanban, X-Scale, Agenda Shift, Patrick Stayer's Okaloa Flow Lab community, in addition to TameFlow. So that's tough for us independent consultants to keep ourselves involved in multiple threads, but I think it's really important for people to do, actually. And then, I have my binge watching of a series that I hear about and hang out with my wife.
What makes you happy, like at the end of the day?
At the end of the day, I think I really look to see, who did I have an impact in terms of my relationship building with folks and supporting people as best I can. Great if that's in the context of some sort of work success. But in terms of setting up a situation where we can exit as coaches, we want to have an impact on the internal leaders, the people that really say, this is turning me on. I'm loving this. I want to do more. We're always looking for those folks, right?
Right. So Tom is coming back with a comment. He was referring to, was the first book that you read about TameFlow, was it the Hyper book?
Okay, I see. Yes, it was. Well, actually, it might have been the Essence first, but then the Hyper book, and then followed by the Tame Your Workflow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you've been around quite a while in this industry. What is like the most important skill or insight that you've gotten out of it?
Oh boy. Well, I guess, being able to, over the years, become an ever better listener and understand that the ways in which I might have a struggle with my clients often are not necessarily a reflection of what I am doing or what I did, but some playing out of their early distress that maybe I am re-stimulating their emotional reaction to something. So I really try to stay aware of that so that I'm not taking things personally. Now, often I might just make a really bad mistake and get people pissed off. So that happens too, for sure. But being able to listen, and then I'm a real fan of clean language. So the idea of being able to talk to people without inserting your advice and your own thinking into the is something that's good. And then maybe my number one comment is, do not become the smartest guy in the room, because that's an exit, really. You don't want to do that, right? So
yeah, but there has to be a Herbie.
True. I mean,
no,
maybe
I'm just
a Jonah here and there too. Yeah.
So where do you see TameFlow in all this?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I like to think that we can, if you look at the incredible sums of money that companies invest in consultants and coaches, right, with zero regard to strategically applying them to where the big impact in the company can happen, which in our language would be the constraint, right? So that to me is the most exciting piece, and incredibly powerful in terms of the impact that we can have with a client with a far less investment than is often the case, following methods that are pushed in oftentimes and really focused on team level agile. And there's nothing wrong with team level agile, but if you really want to go anywhere, we need to see the interaction of teams and be able to, instrument the system in order to be able to understand things like, hey, flow efficiency, right? So, and where is the constraint? So that's where I think those are all exciting pieces from TameFlow that I'm engaged with.
Okay, and as you know, we have a community site. I know you know because you're a member of the TameFlow community, and there you can see the URL, and I invite all people listening to join the community. So what do you see that you would like to get out of that? The community part of TameFlow, and what kind of people have you found, and what kind of people would you like to get there?
Yes. Well, I have found some great trainers and coaches, and that I am connecting with as we speak to, in particular, engage the patterns that are available from TameFlow in an engagement. What is the, what are some of the prerequisites? There are some patterns that really you might want to jump to without kind of learning and engaging previous patterns for the particular context you're dealing with. So that's really what I'm excited about learning more about. I mean, so right now I'm like bringing flow efficiency boards, for example, as an early opportunity. And then I'll say, Steve, that in my experience, and I consider myself an empiricist, what I trust the most is my own experience. And what I have found is that the challenge of dealing with overburden in a big enterprise is unbelievably difficult. It is really difficult. So anything there, and there is a pattern at the end of the book. It's one of the very first patterns that you bring to bear for starting, is to deal with too much WIP. But there are a lot of dimensions to that in a big company. And you need to go very high, and it speaks to your guidance to go for the CEO, because if you don't get up, in my experience, if you can't get up high enough for an executive to cover both the business and the technology side, you're not going to get what you're looking for. You're not going to get there.
So now maybe I'll go over to my ranting part. Is there anything, any question in particular? I understand you're interested in patterns, but any question in particular you would like me to look into?
Well, the starting, I really like your ideas, and they're very consistent with my experience, that you need to start with a slice, a vertical slice, and not the slice through the stack that we're used to looking for in a good story, an executable, but one that's more like an executable of learning and flow development. So speaking to that would be great to hear. What does that look like, and how do you go about that?
Yeah, well, okay. I'll get started here, and you know what? I'll do something different today compared to the other first two episodes. I will keep you there live. Let's see if this works, so that you can comment on what I am doing. So now a bit of juggling here. I'll try to put on the screen share, and take that one away. Hold on a second, I'm not quite done yet. I'm maneuvering screens and windows. Of course, doing this kind of stuff, you develop a lot of dexterity, which I would never imagine I actually had. So this is interesting. Okay, so I had prepared something, but since you're asking about patterns, I'll just do a quick sketch of how I see this, because TameFlow was born out of patterns, and in particular Alexandrian patterns. So they are always presented or thought of as a solution to a problem in a context. So you always have these three elements that, like, together they constitute a pattern. It is a very technical definition, but the important thing is that once you have found a context and a problem, of course you might consider many solutions, S1, S2, S3, but the moment that you pick one particular solution, Well, that pattern, that triplet, can be considered as a new context. So this is equal to a context where you might have many, many other problems, and you might focus on one problem, look at many, many, many other solutions, pick one solution, and there you have the next context again. So you see that these things go on and on and on. And the nice thing is that you can give names. You can give names to these patterns, descriptive names. Now, of course, I'll just make them up. Maybe this is Venus, and this is, I don't know, Pluto, whatever. And therefore, when you do this composition, you can combine these names, and that is a language that describes what you have been observing. And once you start to have many of these languages and verbs, you can describe situations that maybe are not in your reality. So they become an element of design. And you combine all these things together, pattern after pattern, and you can reason about how the organization is designed and how the different options, what different options are available. Let's see if I can clean up here. I've been messing around with drawing as usual. When I get a whiteboard, I go overboard. Is that a good way of saying?
Yep. I love Miro, and I think you do really great work with it. So
thank you.
Yep.
So that's like the short of it. So yes, in a company where you have, let's see if I can pick the pen again. You have like a hierarchy of departments and so on and so forth. What is interesting is that you, at the various levels, you will have different patterns. So let's draw our small triangles that are applicable there, but could also be applicable across the different departments. So whenever you start with TameFlow, you will try to find a combination of patterns that exercise the whole stack. You used the word stack before, so that exercise the whole, well, let's say hierarchy.
Okay.
And this is the scope of action when you initiate a TameFlow transformation. That's why you always have like the CEO at the top who is part of that. Why? Because the CEO at the end of the day is the recipient of all information that comes from all levels. So this is where you have the informational flow in action. And unless you have like the destination of the informational flow there, you won't be able to get the benefits of informational flow. And the CEO is always involved to resolve problems that can arise at any level of the organization. And what we do in TameFlow is to like try to make these feedback loops work faster and faster and faster. So that's why the CEO has to be part of it, and that's why even at the very beginning we want to exercise the whole hierarchy. So this was it in a nutshell. Yeah.
So to the question of how high you escalate, does it kind of relate to the impact? So we talk about penetrating the buffer for the constraint, and so I take it, if you've got a big enough cost of delay or impact of the problem that you're experiencing, that you go as high in that chain as you need to resolve. Is that fundamentally how it works?
We can think in terms of your span of control. If you're here, you have a certain perimeter that you control. You can act in. But then when you have a problem, that problem might be outside of your span of control. It might be in the sphere of influence, because you can influence a person who has control over that part. So if the problems are like bigger and bigger, you just keep on escalating until eventually you will get to the CEO who has control over the entire organization. So basically, the rule is you escalate until you find someone, the first one, who has control over the possible resolution of whatever it is you're escalating. Even the CEO might not be in the position to resolve, because at times, of course, we live in a value chain. So you might have suppliers that are involved in this, or you might have regulators that influence whatever you are doing. But of course, as long as you're within the company, the rule is now escalate till the point when you are finding the person who can act in control of the resolution. Yeah.
So Steve, Nick asks, similar to Hoshin Conry or X Matrix, is it similar or are there differences?
I'm just not familiar enough with those approaches, so I wouldn't dare to answer. Maybe sometime Nick will have you as a guest, and you will explain what it is, and let's see if we can find similarities. Okay. So let's see. Okay, this was a bit of a detour, but I wanted tonight to go into the what I would say is the core of the Tame Your Workflow book, the contribution that I think me and Daniel, we've done by writing this book, and it has to do with identifying the constraints and these notions of the constraint in the work process, in the workflow, and in the work execution. And I would start off by pulling in a page from the Hyperbook, which Tom mentioned before, because this, I think, is what most people have in mind when they try to find the constraint on a Kanban board. Now we start with the story of Herbie, and the path that Herbie is walking with the team are like tasks, are the steps, are the things to be done. So we can just rotate those steps by 90 degrees. We are already getting in this configuration that resembles a Kanban board. And the next step is, of course, just to take this and space them out equally. And guess what you have there? You have a Kanban board. So what you would typically do in Kanban, Minton, you tell me, you look for starvation or larger queues. Now maybe here, if you would look at this would look like Herbie, because it has the greatest amount of steps in front, but actually this is the backlog. So what we should be looking at is this one.
Yeah.
And this is a very, very common perspective, and I think that's the reason why the search for Herbie in knowledge work through Kanban just got lost, because this perspective, in my opinion, is not entirely representative of what is going on. It is important in many, many ways, but because these amount of steps can vary so much from one moment to the next, you get the impression that you have the wandering constraint. It moves from one place to the other and to the other, and therefore you cannot control what is going on. And that's why we start introducing the whip limits, 5, 3, 2, whatever, to try to limit the working process and get stability, which is a good way of doing it, but it prevents you from finding the constraint. And not only does it prevent you, it actually masks you from seeing the constraint. So how do we do this? I did a very summary introduction to this last week when I was guest of John Coleman, but that was so quick. So I I want to go into deeper detail here.
Great.
And the idea is that we have to change perspective. We have to change perspective, and let's start off with our three Boy Scouts. Guess who's Herbie? Yeah, it's the red one. And the three Boy Scouts are starting in the morning to look at what they are getting themselves into. So they are looking at that. Maybe, okay, we'll go that path and we will pass through some woods, and later we'll have to wade over a stream, and then it becomes harder. We have to climb a mountain, and then on the other side we need to get down, and maybe we have to cross a swamp, and finally we'll get to base camp. So
all right.
what is this? It's planning. Or it's anticipation, it's expectation. You just don't go blindfold all the time. You do roadmaps. You expect to be in a place and get to somewhere else. And when you do this, I forgot to bring down the base camp there. When you do this, you might also very likely, say, okay, we expect to be there at these times, and of course, this is all hypothetical, but you better have some idea of where you will be, because otherwise you will not get to base camp before dark, and you will not want to stay out in the woods. Now, in this perspective, let me flip over to the next slide, and let's see if I can do this. Just bear with me, I have to select something. Okay, maybe this works. Okay, we expect to follow a path which we envisioned, and the way I introduce this is that we should stop thinking in terms of the Herbie Scouts who are walking their steps, but rather start looking at the let's call them the stuff that is in their backpack, the work items. So like the stickies on our boards. Now the stickies are golden colored, yellow, because they are precious. They represent business value, and we want to be more efficient in moving across this path. So instead of having Herbie and his friends with a backpack, what we will have is like a jeep. So we can load the jeep with some of these golden nuggets, and then go all the way on our path to the base camp. But we have lots of gold, so what will happen is that we then go back and load the next load, and this like cycle repeats, it iterates all the time. So the jeep is like our team. The whole set of scouts, we've replaced them with something that is more efficient. We have improved the process of transporting the golden nuggets from the dark woods to the base camp. But the jeep will also have some Herbie inside. Will have some element which is what prevents it from going any faster. So inside here, there is something that is the constraint in the work process. It could be the engine. The engine cannot go more than a certain amount of revs, so that is limiting the speed by which the jeep can progress. But not only this, we are seeing that in our plan, the climb to the top of the mountain is probably what is going to to slow us down the most. So in all the sectors of the of this journey we're doing, there is one place somewhere over here at the mountain where we are discovering that there is a constraint in the workflow. The golden nuggets have to flow from the dark woods to the base camp, but there in that climb they will be moved slower. So we have this constraint in the workflow. But then you know what? Stuff happens. So by the time the Jeep arrives at the swamp and it's almost at destination, it has like a failure, an engine failure. So everything has to stop. That needs to be fixed. And this is what I call the constraint in the work execution. So there you have it. You have these three constraints in the work process, the workflow, and the work execution. But I already hear your next question, Minton, and it's probably as well, how do you actually do this in practice? Is it so?
Yes, indeed. That is what I'd like to know.
So let's look at something that we can relate to more easy. And let's say that we have a backlog with stickies, of course. And you know, this is a high-level backlog that we can consider like a portfolio backlog, a backlog of epics. And because we're dealing with a large organization, and you, Minton, you have dealt with large organizations, right?
I do.
So you know a bit how entertaining it can be when you do like enterprise projects. It's always fun. So let's say we have three teams. Coincidentally, they are like blue, red, and yellow, and any piece of work that we have will contain elements that then will feed into these three teams, and this is where we need to start to be a bit more sensitive to what these elements actually are. So we might start to do a sort of, sorry about that, it's always the selection that is making it difficult. We might start hold on, please Miro, take what I want. Miro is confused. Okay, there. We might start breaking down the work into the components that will go to these different teams. And what does this actually bring us? Well, before we start working, we can visualize, we can envision what bits and pieces go to which team. So we'll maybe start picking out the green pieces and put them here. No, this is not happening. It's what we are, it's the envisioning, it's the roadmap. So we understand that these elements will be executed by these respective teams. Now maybe I as usual, I got a bit confused, so I didn't keep the right order, but it doesn't matter, because what matters here is that we can start looking at these queues, these virtual queues that are like in front of the teams. So let's do this maybe a bit better, and I will just try to align these on the right side like this. Oops. Not like that. Patience. Like this. And of course, what we see here is that the red team has the largest queue in front of it. So the red team is the one that we will consider the constraint in the workflow. All these story cards that we have represented in these different colors, they are the workflow. So the constraint in the workflow is this one because it has the longest queue. And this one is going to the red team. So the red team we consider as a constraint in the workflow. So we've nailed like the first constraint. Where do the other two come in? Well, the next one is that now we are fond of using flow time distributions. So the next thing is that we will do that in more detail. So not the end-to-end flow time, but the in-state flow time. And here we will focus on the in-state flow time that is the longest on that board. So it will be this one for development. And what do we do then? Well, we instrument this board as a DBR board, so we will have a buffer that is placed over there. And this particular column is the constraint in the work process. So we found the second one. But then we have the execution. And what do we do then? Okay, maybe I forgot to bring down. Here we're looking at the longest queue, and here we're looking at the longest flow time. Sorry, not like that. Let me draw that like that. Okay, so then we need to look at what happens in during the execution, and there we monitor the buffer penetration. So each one of these teams will like have an expected flow time distribution, and on that distribution we can like place a buffer. Or more visually, we might say that we have like, oh come on, Miro, why is it not doing what I want there? We could have a buffer like after the blue team, we have a buffer after the red team, and a buffer after the green team. And as the teams are working, we will monitor the buffer consumption. So at a certain point, it might look like this. And here you see that the green team has been consuming its buffer faster. So in this particular instance, the green team is the constraint in the work execution. So there you have it. To summarize, the longest queue, that is the constraint in the workflow. The longest flow time is the constraint in the work process. And the greatest buffer consumption is the constraint in the work execution. Now, as you know, when you have these buffer charts, the buffer consumption, you will typically also represent the consumption on a buffer fever chart. But the evolution of the buffer fever chart is the buffer bubble chart, where on one single chart you can represent the status of all teams. So this is like the war room, where the general can see the progression of all their teams on the ground, and clearly point out where you have Herbie. Now,
so I have a question, Steve.
Tell me.
Where, in the case of the non-constraint teams where they've run into trouble in terms of as indicated by their buffer, are they more likely to be special cause than common cause? Is that correct?
Well, typically in the work execution, you will be affected mostly by special cause variation. Yes, but okay. Within one one Kanban board, or one team, the longest flow time is mostly due to common cause variation.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so that's more or less how you bring these things together. Then, of course, when you have these buffer events, there are completely other techniques that we use to trigger, like the meetings, to trigger the root cause analysis, and so even the whole retrospectives we're doing in TameFlow are much more factual and, how can I say, more reactive. We might do a retrospective on the spot. So
Right.
if we go back to what you were asking about before, about the patterns and the levels of escalation, if the signals, the work execution signals, show you that there is a problem developing, let's just maybe make this a bit more evident. Let's take this bubble chart, and what we're seeing here is that the purple dots are heading, so to say, towards the red zone. So probably there will be problems. You're having some early signals, and here you would like escalate, and you would reach the person who has the resolution in its span of control, which means that at any moment, a TameFlow team can escalate this all the way up to the CO. And when the escalation happens, you will also have the right, shall we say, protocol, so the right information is prepared so that the CO can get the right information and like the right understanding of the situation, and quickly resolve this. It's one of the reasons why TameFlow is so extremely performing, because we detect problems very early, we even anticipate them, and if we cannot resolve them, we exercise the informational flow, we reach the level of resolution very quickly. And of course, this has the counterpart commitment that the CEO and all the management levels in between have to respond to these requests. So this is where we get the paradigm of management by exception, and that is one of the most fundamental ingredients of TameFlow. I think I probably exceeded a bit my 20 minutes, but this explanation was slowed down by my lack of dexterity with with Miro. So let's see if there are any comments that have come in now. Maybe you've been reading them, Milton. Do you
Yes.
see anything interesting?
Yes. Well, Nick did give us a little background on X matrix, which is good.
I see it here. Let's put
Yep.
it up. So it's the same as Japanese. Carl Scotland is the aficionado in Agile about it. My good friend Dimitar introduced it to me. Steve knows Dimitar well. Yes,
Yep.
I do. I wonder if Dimitar is here. Dimitar, if you're on, say hello in the comments.
And I've been to Carl Scotland's workshop on X matrix, and it's good stuff. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, I'll be happy to learn more about that. Then what do we have? Daniel, CCPM buffers come at no cost, unlike... Yeah, this is another point which is rather than being a thing of fact, it's rather a thing of interpretation and how you define what a buffer is. So the buffers we have in TameFlow are a mechanism to create work execution signals. They are not there to safeguard. They are not a safety feature. In fact, we want to take away all padding that you might have in other approaches. I mean, the spirit of CCPM was to slash in half all estimates because they are so full of nothing. They are so full of empty stuff that just inflates them. So what else? Daniel again, WIP aging buffers come for free. Yeah, that's true as well. Nick, Lean does not have these buffer charts as far as I know. You are correct, Nick. That's one of the greatest thing of theory of constraints, that they have introduced this kind of buffer management. Okay, and Daniel, again, he is an accountant, so he's concerned about cost accounting. We do not pay for buffers. That's true. Okay, so I don't see any other comments, so unless other comments are coming in. Now, do you have any final?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So in terms of the day-to-day, okay, with management by exception, would the assumption be that whoever is the appropriate involved skin in the game manager for the escalation, for let's say the buffer penetration, we've gone to red, whoever feels the pain the most is going to be doing the convening of a just-in-time group to talk about it? Is that kind of the way it would work?
I wouldn't express it in terms of who feels the pain the most, because it might not be the same person. But okay. It's in this, I hate the term chain of command, but it gives the idea. So rather than saying chain of command, I would say in this growing sets of span of control, the baton stops at the first one that has power of action.
Okay? I see.
So it doesn't need to go up to the CO. It could be just your first level manager. If that manager is able to resolve the issue, or the second level, eventually, and this growing sets of span of control, you will either get to someone who can resolve, or you will get to the CO. And if the CO cannot resolve, even reaching out to his sphere of influence, for instance, by convincing suppliers to act on something. Well, if you can't do anything about it, what do? You pivot, you change strategy. So it becomes a strategic decision. It's no longer an operational decision, but it's just getting to the point that, hey guys, we had great expectations, but failing is learning. So we learned that this doesn't work. It might cost us maybe a few millions. It's a harsh lesson, but we can do something else.
So, quick follow-on question: it would be important, would it not, for the mental model of information signaling and management by exception in that vertical to be there? I mean, people need to have some understanding of this is how we're going to work, right? So, from a training and coaching point of view, that might be true.
Absolutely, so there are many mental models we could share, but the most important one is throughput, and in particular financial throughput. Now you can have like a scale from operational to C levels. The higher up you go, the more you have focus on financial throughput.
Okay.
And the lower it's on the operational throughput.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Now I see a couple offerings from Danielle, decentralized decision making, and the most agile type of decision making, military-like.
Yeah, that's like the idea of mission command. Get that hill. I don't care how you do it. It's your problem in a way. Yeah. It's commander intent, and this is where most management approaches break down, because they being based on cost accounting. Cost accounting is like the root cause of these things. Being based on cost accounting, you are necessarily using different KPIs in different silos in different departments, and therefore these KPIs do not match the objective of increasing throughput. So even if someone might understand verbally what the commander intent is, if that person or team or unit is then measured on another number, which is not the one that the
Yeah.
CEO had in mind, they will behave differently. And what happens then? The CEO will just say, no, do it my way. And there you have command and control. Command and control is not explained in terms of, oh, management are entertaining like obsolete, Tayloristic like thoughts, so they can't relate to the beauties of Agile. That's a very romantic notion that we see in Agile, but it's just not the reason. The reason for command and control is that the top guy just cannot trust the people working for him. Why? Because they will behave in contradiction, in conflict one with the others. Why? Because they have KPIs that tell them to do so. Why? Because we have cost accounting, which by nature slices and dices and so on.
Never leads to a good decision. So Nick has a comment there.
Okay, where's Nick? US Agile coaches and consultants don't get access to the CEO. Make it tough when permission does not exist. Tough place, no questions here, more a quandary. I mean, Minton, you are in the US, so...
Yes, well, I'll take it as us Agile coaches and US Agile coaches.
Okay.
But I certainly, we talked earlier about the challenge of getting to the CEO in a big company, and in my case, I look to see how high can I possibly get, where do I have a chance, and then what will be the impact of getting there, short of perhaps your desire that we get all the way to the CEO.
Of course, we don't want to be confined to the realm of wishful thinking, like, oh, I wish I could get to the CEO, but reality doesn't allow me to. So we need to develop methods to get there in better ways. And yes, I and Daniel, we're working on this, and we have some strategies. And this will be one of the elements that will distinguish TameFlow from all other Agile approaches, because it will become C-level exec material very, very soon.
Yeah, and if it's in my own experience, if it's a end-to-end issue that you need to get high enough to span, someone that can span the conflict zone is useful. So,
yeah. So we are running out of time. Minton, thank you very much for being such a wonderful guest that even helped me throughout the explanations. I think I will repeat this because it makes it more interactive, and I have a better feeling of what comments are going on because you're telling me. There are just too many balls to juggle with Miro and this streaming software.
Well, I much enjoyed being with you today, Steve. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Great. And to all people listening, if you want to get in touch with Minton, he is in the community. So make sure you are also members of the community. Do you remember maybe what your community handle is?
Yes, it's Minton Brooks, no space, MINTONBROOKS.
Okay, so there you have it. You can reach out to Minton on the community if you have questions for him. So time is over. Thank you, and until next time. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.